Welcome to More Than Miles, the podcast where we use storytelling and expert interviews to widen the lens on what it means to be a happy and healthy endurance athlete. We believe that athletes are so much more than their body, sport, and training miles. I'm Dr. Kate Mihevik-Edwards.
And I'm Dr. Casey Sinders. We are endurance athletes, physical therapists, and huge coffee addicts. We spend most of our time treating, educating, and working with endurance athletes. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Now let's get to the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to More Than Miles. Today we have Kate and Casey on microphones. We're on Zoom, but for your purposes, we are on the microphones. And today we're going to be talking about running safety, specifically talking about harassment. We're going to transition into talking about Strava and social media as well. We think this is a really important topic, a little bit different than what we've talked about before. And it's something sometimes we want to ignore, but we really can't and should not. And this is sparked from a while ago when professional runner Molly Seidel posted on both Instagram and Strava saying that she was going to change her use of Strava for her own safety. And I think it's a really important discussion that we have.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Casey. We started talking about this a while ago, and between the two of us, of course, and we've been reading more and more. And even though we are both runners and have, experienced running at night or running during the day, and we haven't necessarily experienced as much harassment as maybe other people have. So when I've been diving into the statistics, I was rather shocked. And so I'd like to share some of those statistics with you in case this isn't a topic that you are highly aware of. So 1 in 3 American women say that they've been harassed online. 43% of women have experienced harassment more than once. In a Runner's World survey in 2021, they were asking women about harassment, and they found that 84% of women are harassed while running. 25% report regularly being subjected to sexist comments and unwanted sexual advances. 6% say that they felt threatened enough to fear for their lives. And 11% of female runners have stopped running due to harassment. Of all of these women, 90% of these women say that the harassment is coming from them. So these are a lot of numbers that I just threw at you, and they're a lot of big numbers, and they're really important because it says that this is happening all of the time. And as runners, whether you're a man or a woman, we really need to start thinking about our safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know I've definitely experienced this multiple times in my years of running. And, you read about like tips on how to prevent this or how to protect yourself, right? And we'll get into that in a second. But one of them being, wear more clothing, with which, here in the Atlanta summer, it is deadly to wear more clothing. And it's like, I'm not out here to impress you. I don't want your attention. Like, I'm out here doing my workout and I'm wearing this amount of clothing for a reason because I don't want to overheat. It's really frustrating because it's what we're doing out there as female runners is not attention seeking. It's definitely frustrating to get catcalled. For me, it's quite frequently.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it. And, I haven't really been running for a while. So, but I remember in my early 20s, I would get catcalled out the windows all the time, and I would just ignore it. And, I also think that, that was long enough ago. That was, in my 20s, I'm 40 now. So 20 years ago, I didn't think much of it, and it wasn't a topic of discussion. So I figured this is just something I have to endure. As a female runner, they're just going to yell things out the window. And I probably gave them the bird, sorry to say, which probably isn't good either. But yeah, I know there were many times when people were just yelling out the window, trying to get your attention. And initially, I didn't think of that as harassment. And I don't know if many people do, but it really is a type of harassment.
Yeah. And, I think the same thing, like, oh, this is just something I have to deal with as a runner. And I don't really, it just kind of passes me by. But I mean, honestly, it's quite unacceptable. And yeah, there's no part of revving your engine as you drive by me that makes me more attracted to you. I'm sorry. Like, if there's any men out there listening, just public service announcement.
Exactly.
But it's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. It's not something that we should have to deal with. And I think we do just brush it off like it's nothing, when it's really, it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I remember my dad giving me pepper spray because he was worried about me running in Atlanta. You know, when I moved to a big city, actually, he gave it to me when I moved to Boston. And I came from a small town and he was worried about that. So he gave me pepper spray. And I remember laughing at him. But the truth is, it's something that, you know, many of us have to carry, especially in a big city or if we're out at night or running through unsafe areas.
Yeah, I have some, I have to replace it because, as we were talking about earlier, my dog chewed the outer cartridge of it. He's fine. He didn't get into the pepper spray, but need to replace that because I do feel safer. I'm an early morning runner. I feel safer having something with me in case I need to defend myself. And speaking of dads giving safety advice, and luckily my dad does not listen to the podcast. I don't know if he knows what a podcast is, but he actually mailed this to me, a large can of Raid bug spray, Raid, RAID,
Yep.
with a note that said, "Put this by your bed."
In case someone broke in?
In case someone broke in. I live across the street from Publix. I can go on Amazon, but no, he personally mailed me this can of Raid. So yeah, I mean, I joke, it's not funny, but it's a crazy world we live in sometimes.
It is. And I think that for those of you listening that may not have really considered, you know, catcalls as harassment or maybe thought about, you know, being nervous about running or those types of things. I was never a runner that even noticed it. You know what I mean? At first, like it happened, I'd brush it off. I'd say it was normal. But I do remember there were a few situations that I got into that were pretty unsafe. And luckily other people were kind enough to notice that maybe I shouldn't be in that situation. So one example is that I moved to Atlanta to go to Emory Medical School in the PT department. And it was my first time in Atlanta and I was training for a marathon and I was out on a 20-mile run, but I didn't really know where I was going. And I don't have a good sense of direction. That's not...
Same, girl. Same.
I didn't carry like a directions with me either. I just kind of ran and figured I'd find my way home, which is not a good idea either. But I did. I started running and I ran past Memorial Drive. And if you know Atlanta, now it's a lot better, but 20 years ago, it wasn't a lot better. And I ran out and I started noticing that I was all by myself. People were yelling out the window more often. And I thought, oh, they're just being nice. And I'm not kidding because this is how I was in my 20s. And then I started to notice there were bars on the windows everywhere and that I started to look really unsafe. And I didn't know how to get home. And luckily, a police officer pulled over and asked me to get in the car. And I thought I was in trouble, of course. And I was like, what did I do? And he said, girl, I don't think that you're supposed to be running here. Can I take you home? And he put me in the car and he took me home. And I wasn't nervous while I was doing it. But as soon as I got in the car, I realized that I was in a really precarious situation and probably it wasn't good for me to be alone. It was starting to get dark out at the time.
Wow. It's a nice police officer, though.
Yeah, he was a really nice police officer. But I think I bring that story up because there are many of us that might be oblivious to the fact that we have to be aware of our safety out there. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that aren't oblivious to it because they've had situations they've had to deal with. But I think there's also a good part of the population that maybe doesn't realize they need to take their safety more seriously.
Right. I mean, I live in the Midtown area and I run through Piedmont Park quite often, and I always felt pretty safe there. And we've had an uptick in crime in Piedmont Park, including someone being killed. I don't remember how many months ago now, but pretty recently. I remember feeling really frustrated. I was like, this is one of the places I felt was safe and it has lights and stuff. And usually there's a lot of people around, even early in the morning because there's boot camps and stuff like that. But you have to be aware of the things that are going on in your surroundings and be really careful when you're out in the dark for sure.
Yeah. And we also, before this, we started this recording this podcast, we're talking about a couple of elite runners that have dealt with this issue, and some more intensely than others, or some runners that have seen it happen to others or have had harassment and very scary situations happen to themselves.
Yeah. we were reading the article, the very in-depth article that was written about Emily Infeld and her stalker who had found her online. I think it was specifically on Instagram, and turned into a very dangerous situation. And he had threatened to kill her, actually, and had moved very close to her home. So if you think about a runner who is outside, running, 80 to 100 miles a week, she wasn't really able to do her job, obviously living in fear. I mean, I know the job is probably the least of her worries at that point, but just, the things that can happen with internet harassment. I think she's kind of moved beyond it. She had, obviously got the police and law enforcement involved. And I doubt she feels on the other side of it. I think she feels on the other side of it, but I doubt she feels 100% safe, and she may never because of this, right?
I think that the article that we read was talking about how he had got an apartment or a hotel room 2 miles away from her house. And this was kind of the culmination of 3 years of him stalking her and her trying to hide. She had hopped on a plane to get out of Portland and get away from him. Her fiance carried a baseball bat in the car just in case. I can't imagine what it's like to live in that kind of fear.
She's having a really good year this year. She switched coaches and, has made it through some injuries. I mean, I know a lot of my patients are big Emily Infeld fans because she's kind of the comeback queen from injuries and gives people some really good inspiration in their rehab journeys. But, you have to consider that if she's feeling safer now and more mentally well, then that's one of the big reasons why she's running so well right now, too. So I can't imagine the psychological load of that.
No. And we talk all the time about, stress is stress. And no matter what kind of stress you're under, it impacts your performance and it impacts your health and how often you get injured. And if you're dealing with something of that magnitude, there's no way that you can stay healthy and be able to train, the way that you want to train, because psychologically you are overflowing, right? You've reached your max.
When we talk about fight or flight mode all the time, because, that's what the sympathetic nervous system is there, is to alert you to danger. And so if you feel in danger all the time, your body's never resting and digesting. Mm-hmm. No. Really bad nervous system joke right there.
But true. It's very true. And you can't really process your training and you can't really get well if you're in that situation, if you're always stressed about whether you're safe or not. Safety is a basic need that we need to have covered. And if you don't feel that way, there's no way you can perform at a high level. Another story that we were reading about, again, on Runner's World, was something Molly Huddle was talking about, a story about a teammate. After practice, they all left practice. Everyone was kind of dispersing, and she was pulled into a van right after practice. And luckily, the coach happened to catch it and save her, but she was pulled into a van by somebody. And that's in a place where there are a lot of people around, and it's busy, and you would think that you should feel safe. But unfortunately, that was not the case. Unfortunately, she was okay. But we're not really telling these stories for you guys to feel really nervous. I don't want everyone to get, really nervous that they can't run. It's just, I think, more of an awareness. And I think it's an important topic with everything that's coming up right now with women's rights and social media, and just kind of bringing awareness to the topic.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's always something to, I think, because, we love our sport so much and we love the freedom that it gives us. I think it's, we hear these stories and then we just kind of push them to the back, on the back burner or into the back of the brain, just because, we don't want anything to ruin probably, for a lot of us, the most joyful hour or two of our day. But it's definitely something we need to keep bringing forward and stay cognizant of. And I think for a lot of us, having a buddy system or having someone with us when we run is probably the safest thing we could do, in addition to, some of the other gear that's out there, such as pepper spray and whistles and, having your phone with you, taking all of the measures that you can so you can be as safe as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's the number one thing is, letting people know what your route is, before you go, maybe having a buddy system where you text someone. If you can't run with somebody, text them when you leave your house, text them when you get back, so that they know if you're not back or safe and quickly. There's even things out there, like you mentioned, pepper spray, whistles. You can have your phone, but there's personal alarms you can have with you too. So there's a lot of things you can take with you, of course, as runners. And I don't know about you, but I was never one that wanted to carry a lot. So I think that the buddy system, or running with someone else, and perhaps running in daylight hours, not running the same route all the time, mixing it up, those kinds of things would be really helpful.
Yeah, I don't like carrying things either, but I've definitely had to get over it because I am an early morning runner, just because of my schedule and because of it's what my body likes. And so I have to be a little extra careful. And the pepper spray things aren't really that large. And big pro tip here, that a lot of sports bras many companies make sports bras that have these pockets in them, which is great because then it doesn't bounce around like in your shorts. And it's just kind of like in between your shoulder blades, essentially. And it's my newest obsession. And pretty soon I won't have any sports bras without pockets. To me, it's the equivalent for me of a dress with pockets.
Oh my God, amazing.
Thanks, it has pockets, but I feel that way about sports bras. So anyway, I mean, there's a way to make it comfortable and way to make it a little bit more accessible and hopefully not too burdensome, because you never know when it could be life-saving.
It's true. I used to also run with a key between my fingers. Have you ever done that? When I would get really nervous at night. So I used to run at night because I'm a nighttime runner and I'm a night owl. I'm not a morning person. So I'd run right after work and I would put a key right between my fingers. And I must have realized that I was nervous if I started doing that. I don't know why I did that, but I was obviously felt like there was a good reason.
Yeah, give them the old brass knuckles.
That's right. All right. So I think that the next thing that we should really talk about when it comes to this is that social media effect and that piece that has to do with social media. And since that's something that is a hot topic right now, and it's the reason we kind of thought we should have this podcast. Some stats that I found, I was looking at the 2020 Running National Survey. It's the survey that kind of looks at running across the board in the United States. It looks at running trends, things that people like to buy, where they spend their time, what kind of races they like to run, and what they do, what the impacts of social media are, all of those kind of things. So it's a really interesting survey that I actually look at almost every year, and they come out late. So you can't always get the information right when you want it, but I have the information from the 2020 survey. And what social media is used for, according to this survey, is to follow running stores, running brands, and elite runners. Those are the top 3 reasons why people use social media related to running. Facebook is actually the most popular social media platform for runners. And the reason that they do use social media, according to this survey, is that it helps them train better, track progress, and avoid injuries. But there's also this part of it that's really competitive and comparison. Like you're looking at other people's times and other people's runs, and that changes how you look at yourself.
Yeah, especially when we talk about Strava, right? So the app where you can have all of your workouts uploaded to it, and you can show your pace and how much elevation gain and all of your splits and all of that stuff. We're competitive people by nature. I think most of us are. So to see someone out there, like, it just depends on your feed of people, I suppose. And this is how it goes for social media too. And so I'm kind of jumping the gun of what I wanted to talk about, but you have to protect yourself when it comes to social media and protect your own psychological well-being. So you curate the people that you follow. And so if you know that the people that you follow impact you negatively, unfollow them. Don't put yourself through that. Just unfollow them. I think that's something that we have to monitor, like self-monitor and be sort of careful with. But anyway, back to Strava. I know that
No, actually, I think we should go down there first. We could come back to Strava, but I think we should talk about social media and self-image and all of that. And so one of the things I've found with myself, and I find with runners in general and patients and friends, is that, we're already putting enough pressure on ourselves, right? So we're already pretty type A. We're already pushing ourselves to the limit in most cases, whether it's running, life, whatever. But social media actually creates an extreme amount of pressure and performance anxiety for a lot of people because of the destructive things that we see on it and the comparison, it often decreases our own confidence. It can be because we are looking at all of these feeds and we don't realize that that's happening. Or it can be that people are leaving mean and negative comments on our own social media. So it's really interesting, all of the impacts that it can have on you.
Everyone's got their own use of social media, but I think for most sort of everyday runners or people who are like in my circles, we follow the elites and we kind of look to them for inspiration, for ideas. We're watching what they do because, we're out here trying to better ourselves. And so we assume that if we do the same things that the best do, then we're going to get better personally. And I think for some people are great follows and super inspiring and very, very healthy in that way. When I scroll through social media sometimes and look at the elite runners, I'm thinking about young high school girls looking at the body types and who are just, looking and comparing themselves to what they see in terms of elite runners and thinking they need to look like them to be fast. I think it's almost subconscious. I don't know if it's something that completely registers, but it changes, how we think about ourselves and how we carry ourselves and the choices that we make. While I think everyone has some sort of responsibility in terms of how they frame things, how they talk about themselves, how they talk about others on social media, I think there's a big onus on the elite runners to set a good example. And while I think all of this is improving, I still, at the end of the day, runners are a very homogenous group. I know that there's a lot of people out there trying to change that and diversify it, but as we stand here in 2022, I think they're a very homogenous group.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think that even, knowing the people that we know and the people that we work with, I know too that even elite runners, even though we may hold them to a higher standard, they're still learning too. They're still learning what to do with their body and how sleep impacts it, how social media impacts them, how stress impacts them. So I do think, yes, while unfortunately they've been put in the public eye because of their sport, sometimes we also hold them to this unsustainable level. And because of that, that puts more stress on them. And we really have to realize that they are just people too. And so even though, yes, we look to them to give us an example, I think we also have to cut them some slack because they're still learning just like everybody else. And they're going to make mistakes just like everybody else. And hopefully, they figure it out just like everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of my favorite people to follow are the ones who are really transparent and honest, because I think that's really refreshing, right? Like sometimes, it's nice to get some inspiration of like the comeback story or everything's, everything's fine and, rainbows and butterflies. But seeing someone progress from, maybe being upset about a race or a performance or an injury and seeing that kind of progression from extreme disappointment, sadness, despair, whatever it might be, and seeing that in kind of real time, I think is actually a really positive thing. Disclaimer here that no one's obligated to share anything that they don't want to, obviously, which is kind of funny that I have to say that, but it's true. It's funny though, right? Like sometimes because I think we do. I mean, I'm a millennial and
I'm so sorry because don't get me started. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I find myself thinking a lot about what I say and how it will be perceived and what kind of story I want to tell, because essentially in these days, social media is how most people hear your story, unless they're the, 5 to 10 people that you see routinely, right? I feel silly saying this, but I think this is real. I think a lot of people think this much about it. I don't think I'm the only one.
Real. No, I don't think you're the only one either, but I'm almost shocked that you said that because I think on the other spectrum, like I do not think about that at all. And I mean, maybe it's too much on the other side. I say a lot of things that I shouldn't say and, whatever, but it's interesting because I don't think of that at all. I don't think about, well, what are other people going to think when I post this? Or I don't know. I love your social media posts actually. And I always think, wow, I wish I had thought about that. And that would have been a cool thing to say on mine. Mine's more like, here's this picture of me doing something I love, or hey, here's my son doing something cool, and then some work stuff. Here's are like these beautiful stories and really thoughtful and meaningful topics and discussions on your social media. And I do, now that you said that, I do see the difference in some people's posts and how they present and why they're kind of curating their story. But that's exactly God, I didn't ever think about that before, but it's true. Yours are like these beautiful stories, and mine are like, blah.
I know every once in a while I've got to be like, okay, I need to post just like a 1-sentence caption so that people don't like start tuning me out.
I get stressed out. So I'm like I like my 1-sentence ones. I'll be like, travel.
Here's me traveling.
Here's me drinking coffee.
Here's me drinking.
My favorite.
Here's my front porch.
Oh, it's raining. Anyway,
but there's a place for both, I think, and however you want to use it, as long as you're being true to yourself and you're comfortable, obviously, then we all have our own ways of using it, I suppose.
When we were getting ready to talk to Kara Goucher on our podcast not a few months ago. It was like last week. I don't know. It wasn't that long ago, but I can't tell. By the way, I would like to announce to the public that I was dying of COVID during that interview. And she was so amazing because at one point I said to Casey, I don't know if I'm going to make it, man. I'm so sick. And Casey said, you have to tell her. I'm like, okay. So I told Kara, I was like, Kara, if I have to stand up and throw up, please don't take offense to this, because Casey will just keep going. But I think I have COVID. But it was awful. The reason I bring that up is because her and I were texting, I think before or after that. And she had mentioned she would post our podcast on social media, but she was taking a break because of something that had happened on social media. And that was just another moment of me realizing how much pressure people are under, especially people like that, and how much, negativity goes on that, maybe I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, I have to say I'm very, very impressed with you and how you did 2 very high profile interviews while dying of COVID.
If we had had a video, it would have been quite entertaining. I think my head was down on the table at one point.
Perhaps it was, but you know what else I saw? I saw this I saw you just get it done, right? I wanted to curse right there, but I just saw you go into another mode. I'm just going to get this done. I'm going to make it through. And I'm sure you crashed after, but
yeah. And I was sweating during it. It was not pretty. They had never met us before. And we were talking to Molly and Sarah and Kara all the same day. And we were so excited about it. And I literally was red-faced and sweating and putting my head down. I'm like, God, these people they're never going to talk to me again.
So I don't know how many of our listeners will get this analogy, but this reminds me of the Parks and Rec episode where Leslie gets the flu, really, really sick. And she insists on doing this town hall meeting. She's just looks terrible, right? And then she gets up there and she crushes it. The minute she's done, she's like, wait, why did the walls and ceilings just switch? And she's all freaked out because she's hallucinating, right? So it reminds me of a Leslie moment where you got what you needed to get done, and then that was it.
You didn't hear from me for a whole week after that. I was on the couch, and the only thing I was eating were animal crackers and ice cream. It was rough.
Oh man.
But anyway, and I was one of those people, and we're off topic, but that's okay, who would wanted to get COVID because I had been so good for the last few years and I've been wearing a mask all the time and I never got it. And I thought, can I just get it over with? I heard it's just a cold. And so I thought I was just going to get a cold, and I didn't try to get it or anything, but I got it. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much worse than a cold. And I was surprised and I felt awful. And I seriously thought, thank God I'm vaccinated and boosted. I don't know how I would have done without that. And I also took the medication after day 4 because I felt like such crap.
It just continues to amaze me how different the cases are and how it affects people differently. It's crazy. It's definitely contributed to the complexity of kind of moving through this sort of new world, right?
Absolutely. Because now it's like no COVID anywhere. You can do whatever you want. But then really it's still going on and a lot of people are still getting sick. I mean,
yeah, we're just reacting to it differently, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've become accustomed to it and kind of numb to it, I think, as a society and just over it. But it is overall getting better. But anyway, it was very interesting to have COVID, especially. I was glad when I started to feel better.
Yeah. Yeah, I was too. And I knew you felt better because I had 5 emails in my inbox one morning.
Is that how you knew?
That's how I knew. I was like, oh, I can text Kate again. She's alive.
I can't tell you how many people called me after 5 days of silence to make sure that I was alive. Because I do send emails 20 at a time, 5 at a time, like spurts of like ideas. And then when nobody gets that for a few days, people do apparently start freaking out. It's funny.
Yeah, it's weird.
All right. Well, let's circle back. That was definitely down a path of, I don't know, we could go into nowhere with that, but I did think it was really interesting coming around to the social media piece and talking to Kara. Once again, what really sparked this whole podcast today was when Molly Seidel decided to take her runs off Strava or make them private. And one of the things she said was to be more respectful of my own sanity, which I can completely understand. She also said that Strava is a really cool app I've loved using, but it can oftentimes glamorize overtraining, become overly competitive, or even lead to safety issues. I'm hoping that together we can start finding new creative ways to make it more inclusive and safer for everyone who uses it. And I love that. If we want to even break down that comment, I love it for so many reasons. One, because as a PT who treats runners, overtraining is an epidemic.
Can confirm.
Right. And so it's true. We are type A competitive personalities. So if we see people doing more and more and more, we think, hey, maybe we should do more and more and more. And that takes that whole component of listening to your body as an individual runner out of it.
And, that's the crux of training, right? Is listening to your body and getting your body to respond to training the best way you can. And so if you're taking into account what other people are doing with their bodies that are much different from yours and their training goals that might be much different from yours, it can definitely lead to injury and burnout and, not seeing the results that you want. And I personally struggle with this a little bit, because I'm competitive. I don't know if you know this about me, Kate, but
not at all, especially at the Christmas parties.
Yeah. I do not practice party games just so that I can win when we have our Christmas parties. I don't do that at all.
I've caught you.
Well, when Kay told me that one of the competitions was going to be throwing the dry needling plastic tubes into the garbage can, I stopped walking over to the garbage can. I just practiced all the time.
Well, that's how I do it anyway. That's why I wanted that game. And I almost never miss. So I've been practicing that for years. And so I thought it was a great game because I knew I'd win.
But anyway, so kind of going back to, how you curate your social media feeds. So like when I look at, my Strava, for example, like I do follow all kinds of levels of runners, but honestly, a lot of them are just like me, similar age, similar ability. And so when I see someone that's just a little bit faster than me, it's like, of course, I'm looking at what are they doing? What kind of workouts are they doing? And, what are their average paces? What does their training look like compared to mine? And I frequently have to remind myself not to pay attention to it that much. Like I can pay attention, but then just let it go. It's kind of like Strava meditating, if you will, Kate, where you see someone's workout and you just pass it, let it pass. You just let it go.
I don't think that's meditation, but letting go is a great thing to learn. So maybe Strava letting go is fine. But I would like to point out, as you said, it's, you're looking at these other athletes that are similar to you in a lot of ways and what they're doing. But what you don't see from Strava is how much stress do they have in their life? How much sleep are they getting? Like, what are they eating necessarily? Unless, of course, they include all this. But, all of the other things in their life that contribute to training, because, the physical part, the actual running, the paces, the routes, all of that, the strength training, that's only like a third of training. That's only a third of what makes an athlete an athlete. And so I think that we really also need to understand that. So when we're looking at these platforms, we have to realize that we're only seeing a part of the picture. So to compare ourselves to that and to try to mimic that could really put ourselves in danger in terms of overtraining and becoming overly competitive, because that person is not you and you don't know what else is going on in their life.
Right, exactly. And a question that my coach asks me almost every monthly check-in, and I love this, and she says, well, things look good on paper, but how are you feeling?
It's a great question.
And, I write all of these, I'm pretty honest in my training logs, so it's not like it's complete surprise, but yeah, what's on paper and how you feel, like you could run the same distance, the same pace and feel wildly different between the two. And if you don't feel that great, that could be an indication that something's going on or that you need to back off. Right. So that qualitative part is super important, and not everyone puts all that info on Strava. I don't think people take the time or think that people are interested, but you have to remember that it's just a snapshot that you're seeing. It's important to take into account everything and not just take the highlight reel.
That's right. And it's so easy to do in this culture. And believe me, I agree. That's kind of something that I would like to do as well. But I was just kind of laughing too, because, everything is on Strava or online, and training logs are often digital now. I was thinking back to when I started running back in the old days. I had these really cool journals that I found recently, like my training journals. And it would track the mileage that I would write in, like with a pen, write in the mileage, the pace, how I felt, did anything hurt, what I ate, how much sleep I got. All those things were in my written training journals.
Yeah. And there's still some out there. I know some people still like them. I just would always forget for some reason, because it's on my phone. I'm better about putting things in there.
That's because you're a millennial.
It is.
And I don't mean that in any kind of dig, but it's true. Like I grew up writing everything down. So mine was right next to my bed. So before bed, that was my ritual. It's putting on.
I love that. It is nice though, because you can go back and look, and you can do that online too. But I think there is a charm to the written journal. But I have to say, so I have fun with Strava because, it can inherently get a little too serious and things like that. I'm known for writing really funny titles. So you can title your run. So like the generic thing, Kate is shaking her head at me. I don't know why she's surprised at this.
I'm not, but I think I'm going to love the titles because, I'm waiting for you to give me some jokes.
Oh, I will. Don't worry. So I love, the generic, the way your activity uploads to Strava is like morning run, morning ride, morning swim, or afternoon or evening, whatever it is. That's all it is. But you can change it. Everyone listening knows this. There's a few themes. Like, so sometimes I'll do like song lyrics, which is like, especially if the song like seem to somehow mirror my run. Let's see. I'm going to actually go in my Strava and see some of my best ones. I will share with you my favorite one that I've ever done. Okay. Well, it's not my favorite, but one of my favorites, it was really windy one day. So I said, I felt more blown away than Carrie Underwood in Oklahoma.
No.
Here's a really good one. So this is from last Monday, and I called my 7-mile run, "Can't Be a Trophy Wife If You're a Commemorative Plaque."
No.
So just random things like that. So I try to keep it fun and try not to be too serious about it. But like I said, I have my own inner work to do when it comes to Strava.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So in terms of social media and safety, and that's really what we're talking about today, I think there are a lot of things that we just have to kind of deep dive into for ourselves. And we really need to just be more aware of ourselves and others, whether it's out running or perhaps be aware of our running partners and how they're doing it. And then also kind of what we're saying on social media and how we're responding to others. Like if we're somebody who has put negative feedback on somebody else's feed, maybe consider not doing things like that, because really running is a community. And that's what I love about it. We're a really strong, incredible community. And I think that we just really need to learn how to back each other up even more than we do now, and back each other up in ways of helping to make sure we're safe, and also backing ourselves up in ways that perhaps we are more positive and less critical on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the other thing about social media is that this feeling like you need to respond, like you're responding basically, even if you don't type anything, right? Like when you look at a post, like it triggers some sort of response for you. And this is something where we use social media perhaps to relax or, right before bed and things like that. But like, it's really triggering all of these responses within our brain because it's like kind of part of how we interact with our environment now. So it's actually not that restful, right? Piggybacking off of your comment, I think being positive is definitely the way to go. I try not to get too deep into comments sometimes, especially on, famous people's Instagrams, because it's like, I don't understand why people feel the need to say things like that, No,
I agree. Social media actually feeds on our neurology and on our brain and the way that we process things. So it's designed so that we'll keep coming back, and it triggers some chemicals, neurotransmitters in our brain that create that kind of feedback loop where you keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. And so that's a whole other discussion, but it is something to think about. I did read something recently that everybody should get off social media for 30 days, and then they can kind of relearn how to use it so that they can get out of that feedback loop and that negative feedback loop and that addiction loop to social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Really that's interesting.
Yeah. All right, people. Well, I was going to say party people, but that's all I have to say today. What about you, Case?
That is all I also have to say today. I think that was a good, wide-ranging episode. And yeah, so if you guys have any tips on using social media or just want to say like, hey, this is what I do, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram and let us know how you feel about all of these things.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that it resonated with you and that you learned something. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps increase our visibility within the platform so that more awesome people like you can find us.
If you'd like to support us further, pretty please, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/morethanmiles. That's www.patreon.com/morethanmiles. Or for a few dollars, you can help the show grow and keep going, as well as receive exclusive perks like monthly Q&As with us. Until next time, remember to run the mile you're in, and that training is so much more than miles.